Yeah, man. So again, just a bit of introduction. I'm doing these success chats now with people that I respect and admire from across various industries. So not just music. We're working with people like CEOs of furniture companies, different types of people, basically. And I thought you would be a great example because you've done your fair share of touring, but you're also doing a lot of self-exploration and stuff. And you're just a nice dude to chat to. So,
not to mention the most successful man of all time.
well, yeah, you know, like I say, for people, you know, I mean, like obviously for people that don't know, you've been a touring member of bands, but you've also toured with Eighties Matchbox. You've done stuff with like UNKLE, the Duke Spirit, you know, and obviously you were even a member of NIN for like 5 minutes, which is cool, you know, in its own way. So from that level, you know, from looking back on the, you know, the 80s Matchbox days, looking back on Bad for Lazarus, which is how kind of we really connected. I miss that band so much, dude. I was listening.
I hear that a lot, but I feel like people are remembering it through some kind of weird rose-tinted glasses or something.
Mate, well, that's because you're in it though. You were touring it. You were like staying on people's floors and stuff. So you don't see like nobody sees like what you see.
Nobody sees those flaws.
Yeah. People are just like, oh wow, that my Muddle's a banger. Do you know what I mean? And people go back and like listen to that record and they're like, those are great tunes. And you're just like, man, I lost so much money. Like
that's exactly it. That's exactly it.
But yeah, like so I guess we'll start with the cleanest and most obvious question is how do you define success as a person? What does it mean to you based on your life experience?
I try not to think about success in any terms, man, because that's such a sort of strange and unbinary idea anyway. I mean, one day when you've got no rent money, success is about money, you know, and that's when you feel like you are not successful. Then I've been in other positions where I'm putting a really good income from music and it's not the music I wanted to be playing, and it's sort of taking all of my time and all of my energy and all of my life, and that doesn't feel like a success either.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what you need then, and I guess obviously it's just a matter of balance, isn't it? So that's what I'm aiming for right now, is to try and do stuff that I find personally fulfilling that maybe will pay for itself in a couple of bills as well.
Absolutely. And can you tell me, as much as you can, because I know there's a few things you're working on, as much as you can you tell me what you are doing, you know, coming up, obviously, next few months? Obviously, we're in lockdown now.
I actually talked about that to the person I'm working with and the label today, and I can't talk about anything until now. I want it to be a flamboyant explosion of personality when it happens. And I am just a meager human vessel for that message.
Okay, cool. So what are your inspirations now versus, I guess, when you were, obviously, we're talking Bad for Lazarus, but also when you started out with Matchbox in your early career, how have your inspirations changed as you've changed and developed as a person?
When you say inspirations, do you mean musically or emotion?
Across the board, man, across the board, musically and emotionally.
Back.
If you can, you're back. Okay, did you get that last question?
I did, yeah. How do you mean by inspiration?
Right. So we're talking musically and personally. If you could give me a bit of a broad spectrum on both.
I suppose actually the answer is quite similar. Like old pop music, that sort of that playing between happiness and sadness and ennui and melancholy. I think a lot of innuendo and a lot of subtlety is just lost in modern songwriting, and it's all about one very simple hook, be that emotionally or just actually literally.
Yeah.
And I want to get back to, even though I'm trying to keep things really simple, because that's sort of the crux of that as well, that sensibility where there's more to it than meets the eye, and maybe something a bit more special as well.
Yeah. I'm excited to hear it, man. Whatever you come up with.
I'm excited for it to be heard, man.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, I mean, going on a more personal kind of introspective level, you know, I think it'd be interesting to ask how you've changed. Obviously, we talked about your definition of success, but how have you changed from the person you were when you were doing the European tours and when you first got into music and that kind of period of your life, and all the bands you've been in since then, rightly or wrongly? How have you changed and developed as a person since that time until now?
That's such an expansive question, man. I think a lot of it's to do with honesty between what you think is cool as a person and what you think is cool artistically, will probably end up being really uncool things for the people you're hanging out with, or the kind of musicians you play with. And that's just a matter of how much you're willing to be honest with yourself as well. So now when I'm writing a song, I would say when I was doing Lazarus, for example, I was very aware of how it would be interpreted, and I was almost writing for the listener.
Right.
Now when I write a song, I almost won't start if I don't have a lyric that cracks me up, something that I've said in passing that's so casual and sort of to the point, the sort of things that you'd be afraid to put in a lyric. It has to be where it all begins, and sort of, so honesty in terms of what your actual sensibilities are, and also honesty to yourself when you're actually writing a song and listening to it in third person, rather than it being a glory hunting trip. And you want to make it special for yourself, because otherwise that's another success that you might not have if you just spend that day writing a riff that sucks. Just having the balls to listen to it and go, yeah, it's not good enough, and that doesn't matter, and that's a part of getting to the riff that is good enough.
So
a lot of honesty, man.
That's cool. I mean, that honesty there is really important. Do you think that has kind of bled into your personal life as well? Because again, success professionally and personally are very different things,
No, it's absolutely been a 100% turnaround from essentially posing and worrying to just laying it all out on the line, man. Nice. And like when people have heard some of the music that'll be coming up, and there are a few questionable lyrics that make them sort of wretch in discomfort, and similarly I've had to address a few things in my life with that kind of precision and worry. Here it is,
I mean, you're an interesting sort of person to look at when it comes to image, because the way you've always put yourself across, and when you've kind of presented yourself, you've got a really strong image, but also you always appear very happy whenever I've seen you, and the visuals behind, your bands and stuff, it's very kind of colourful and imaginative and creative. But, it's not without its turmoil. Like I say, that the stories around Eighties Matchbox back in the day, and obviously the perception...
Probably today.
Yeah, the perception given around Clever Thing, for example, perception versus reality. Are you kind of sort of working through, where there was a lot of perception around your art at a time? Are you kind of breaking through that now to more kind of being more realistic, more open with yourself and other people?
Yes.
Right.
I know that's another expansive question. I don't know how to break it down. Can you be more specific?
Yes, I can. So, good question. I think the best way to phrase it would be with the amount of stuff you've done. Again, image is such an important part of, and it has been an important part of the bands you've been in and your own brand, as it were. So I guess, how important is that image now versus what it was back in the day? Do you put less value in image, basically?
Well, when you talk about sort of turmoil versus seeming happy, I mean, that in itself was very astute. So that would be considered an image, I suppose, as well. But that's a really tough question, Dom. You're coming up with some real goodies.
You can take your time on this one, man. It's just,
yeah, mate, I have to click the pause button.
I think the reason I ask is because, your reputation, particularly with Lazarus, particularly when you look back at 80s.
I found it really funny that you say that we seemed really happy, because there was a Brighton movie that had loads of bands in it, and the friend was asking, how come Clever Thing, Lazarus weren't in that movie? And my answer as a joke was that we're probably outside having an argument with each other. But the more I thought about it, I was like, that's probably literally where we were when they were talking about making a fucking movie, So I never felt like, and if you asked anyone else in the band as well, I don't think anyone felt like it was a happy-go-lucky band.
Yeah.
I think that kind of smiley thing was probably more us just being silly on stage, to be honest.
But
it felt like a moody band to be in.
Yeah.
And that's part of what's so lovely now is, I mean, it's only been in the last couple of years that we've really discovered our friendships again. There was quite a lot of damage done by that band, I think, personally.
Yeah. I mean, moving from the band to yourself, how much importance do you place in image now versus what you did when you were, again, very visually vibrant bands you've been in, but for yourself and your own image and your own brand? Do you place less importance in image now than what you used to?
No, but I never thought that I placed a massive amount in image. I always think it's really important for the sake of every avenue of expression is different. I used to think that you see a band set up on stage, especially in a DIY show, before you hear a note that they played. And whether you like it or not, you're getting it, you're assessing something, you know, and that's an avenue. It's small and as ridiculous and as sort of feeble as that idea is, it still exists. You know, from a CD cover to a shirt.
Yeah.
And I just always enjoyed it more than anything.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad, but I think there's one of the things I wanted to discuss with you. The reason why we do these interviews particularly now is because we work with a lot of young people, a lot of mental health issues, and a lot of people that have very different definitions of success. So they might look at you and they might be like, oh, dude's toured with UNKLE, he's toured around Europe with Matchbox and System of a Down, or handpicked by Trent Reznor to join in, for example. All right. And they go, I'm never going to be like Rich. I'm never going to be there. And I'm never going to get to that point.
Don't worry about it.
Well, that's what I mean. So again, perception versus reality. You know, what were you blissfully happy when these opportunities hit you? And of
course not. That's not how it works at all. I mean, you're always working towards something.
Yeah.
And like I say, so when, you know, I got a really good money gig when I was playing with UNKLE, and, you know, I was really making money at my music, and you're playing in front of thousands of people every night, and you're flying from one country to the other, and people are acting like it's important you're there on time and everything. It feels like it's all kicking off. But at that point, I was quite fixated on wanting to do my own writing.
Yeah.
And when I walked on stage, I was kind of thinking about that, to be honest. And I felt aware that, like, maybe there was someone who should be walking on that stage and going, this is so amazing, you know? So now I look back on it, those were probably the biggest shows I did. And it's not like I took it for granted as such, but it wasn't like this sort of cataclysmic moment of making it or success in itself. Now, when I look back on it, I'm really grateful. There's some amazing memories, especially with the friends that I made. That's so great. But I just don't think that that's the artistic life.
Yeah.
I don't think it feels like, unless something really huge happens, you know, there are those moments, like when UNKLE headlined Brixton. That was one of those moments, I guess, when you actually hear what that sounds like when you walk on stage and it's your gig. Because before that, Matchbox had supported a few people there. So you kind of had that. I mean, there was one gig. We finished a song. Our manager wanted us to work in a new song. We finished playing, and you hear Brixton Academy silent.
Right.
Not a clap. It's the loudest silence I've ever heard. So going from that to a couple of years later, headlining was, brilliant.
Yeah.
But that's still just a flash in the pan, and you're working towards something. When you wake up the next day, you know, your mind's on what you've got to do and what you've done.
Yeah.
10 years later, with reflection, it feels a little bit more like a success.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think people can put too much weight on, you know, what they've not done in their life or what they've yet to achieve. And I guess, you know, that's something I wanted to ask you. Do you, in the spirit of, you know, inspiring others or motivating others in some way, do you ever compare yourself to other people? And if you have done in the past, how have you beaten that? How have you been able to stop doing that and, you know, kind of forge forward with your own goals and ideas?
Well, I think that any kind of performance is inherently competitive.
Mm-hmm.
I think anyone that says otherwise is trying to be democratic and look good for your interview. So I wouldn't say anything other than that, really. Like, yeah, of course I compare myself to other people. Like, what kind of artist would look at art when they're going to make art and not make an assessment one way or the other, or think about where they might sit on a scale?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Do you think does that affect? Because again, I get a lot of questions around how that can affect someone's mental health. You know, they compare themselves to, you know, X, Y, and Z musician. A lot of people might compare themselves to you, for example, and go, you know, I've not been there, I've not done that, I've not met these people. So has it affected your mental health in the past? And again, have you got any coping mechanisms? Not as suggestions to other people, because that's very independent to them. But have you got any coping mechanisms and things that you use for motivation in those sort of times?
Nihilism. Yeah. I think growing up in 80s Matchbox, that being a formative, like, kind of growing experience, and those maniacs being my rock and roll parents, the attitude there was that everyone sucks and everything is stupid. And that's healthy, actually. because well, I mean, of course, it's incredibly unhealthy, but from an artistic point of view, it kind of brings everything down to the same playing field, you know, if nothing is important. It's sort of that Johnny Rotten, there's no heroes, they're all useless,
right,
kind of philosophy.
Yeah, no, I can get behind that. And do you I guess, do you actually believe, not to challenge you too much on that, but do you really believe that?
I really like to be pleasantly surprised. I think it's a suit that I wear too comfortably sometimes, and that's actually something I try to work on. Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting, man. I mean, I respect you're able to talk about that. As an extension, then, you know, talking about mental health a bit more, because that's a huge talking point for some of our interviews now. You know, when you are having a down day, or when you are struggling with stuff, whether it be relationships or musical, you know, creativity, you know, what are some things you use for motivation? What motivates you, I guess, the most on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, honestly, Dom, I don't want to lie to you or your listeners. I might not be an expert in that.
Yeah.
I have really fucking hard days. I sit down, I try and write, and it's just the more accustomed I am to that. For me, it's also quite a new thing, you know. Like, I had a sort of spiritual awakening around, I guess, the last time we met, so a few years ago, and it's been a hell of a ride since then. So I'm just getting used to being on the ride.
Right. Okay. And so when you say spiritual awakening, you know, is that a religious thing? Because some people it is. For some people, they find religion. Some people it's a drug. Some people it's a meeting. Some people it's a mistake. What was that for you? If you don't mind sharing that with me.
Absolutely. It was all really a matter of honesty. There was, I suppose, a lot of childhood issues and trauma that I hadn't really done the maths on, looking at it as one kind of image. I looked at all of the fragmented pieces, and then when I put it together, I was like, oh, my life was actually something quite different to what I imagined it to be, which of course frames your present in whole new ways as well. So it's kind of everything was up for examination, man, including music as well, you know. And that's part of why the music got a lot more honest, because suddenly that became like a really, really big priority of mine.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So, so I guess we'll talk a bit more about the music stuff, but purely simply now, where, you know, when we met and stuff, are you happy? Are you a happy person now?
Sure, why not? I'm on the road, man. I'm on that roller coaster.
Okay, cool. I like that. The roller coaster is a good metaphor.
I mean, you know, when I think of times when I would say that I've been happy, I've also been really sort of fundamentally dishonest and just kind of comfortable.
Yeah.
So I am happy to be pushing forward and doing all this discovery and making something meaningful happen. But happiness is too simple a word for the sort of the existential crisis that comes with that discovery, I think.
Absolutely, man. No, I agree. I think it's one of those things you can kind of use it, and it's quite a lazy term, but I always like to put it in.
Sure. Well, yeah, you can define it however you like it, can't you? Or disseminate it.
Like success, people use it differently. People use happiness differently as well. So, you know, I think you'd be ashamed not to ask, because we talked before we started about, you know, some of the relationships you've been in, some of the more negative experiences you've been in, on a personal level, musical level, whatever. And again, you know, can you talk to me about that awakening and the experiences? Again, you know, you don't have to be too uncomfortable. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to go into too much detail with it. But those experiences that led up to that awakening, where you're on that good path now, you know, can you tell us?
Yeah, you want to get really specific and psychological?
Can you tell us about some of them? In the spirit of helping.
Absolutely. No, sure.
Just to clarify why I'm not being
I didn't expect to find myself here. I don't know how many people are interested in that kind of thing. It's so kind of personal, but I suppose a kind of fundamental is it was only me and my mum when I grew up, so I would see her with really shitty men.
Yeah.
And I would say, I'm never going to be like that. I'm going to be perfect, and I'm going to show everyone how easy that is. And in doing so, would kind of put myself at the bottom of a lot of lists and be really eager to please people, which would kind of present itself weirdly in my relationships, my professional life, my band life. And in some ways, maybe that helps, man, because, you know, you don't just get to slot into that many bands that easily, per se. That's maybe find it quite easily to sort of see what people might want to hear and
Yeah, interesting.
But therein lies that honesty, you know. So it presented a lot of problems because you will disappear inside yourself. So you'll either go to the back of the van and just disappear inside your phone, or you'll go to the edge of the couch and disappear inside your mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, to realize myself, I had to kind of step outside of that. And it's tough, man, because also I do believe in being the best person you can be, but those become some blurred
Yeah, the blurred
impulses.
blurred lines, man. It's such a hard thing to kind of manage. And I guess I'm picking up on some of the things you said earlier about when you were writing with Lazarus.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you were writing a lot of the time to make other people happy, and,
Sure.
and creating a lot to make other people happy.
You gotta understand, Bad for Lazarus was my response to getting thrown out of Nails. So I had a lot of ego wrapped up in the idea of success for that.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna, at a point like that, write something psychedelic and mad that I think no one's gonna want to fucking listen to. I want to prove myself, man. But in doing so, no one's gonna sit down and write music to that brief and write their best song. So it's always a bit of a brick wall to hit your head against.
I think it's difficult to. Sometimes it's easy to reflect on the negative stuff. I certainly do it. I think it's fair if I bring a little bit myself into it. Since you're sharing that stuff with me, I do it all the time. And you look at you say referencing you getting thrown out of Nails, man. Like that's an experience that perhaps formed, and you wouldn't have been able to get to this point without.
Absolutely.
I'm assuming. So maybe as comfortable as you are, maybe go into it, because I'm assuming that formed your experience, and I'm assuming that negativity has informed who you are now. But again,
I wouldn't even call it negativity, man. I'd just call it the path. So, I mean, that directly informed it, because leading up to it, my dream had always been doing my own band, writing my own music and performing that. But I just kept getting these opportunities that were bigger and bigger and sort of more ridiculous to turn down. I mean, in fact, I actually did turn down Nails for about a year as 80s Matchbox's manager, that really kept that conversation going, because I think he was keen to take a cut of whatever he thought might be available. So to his credit, he kept that going when at that point, Matchbox were meant to be finishing their album, so I thought it'd be a disaster to up and leave, and that was my home, and they were my friends, so I was like, no, I'm not interested in that. And they just kept asking, and things seemed, like I say, who turns that sort of thing down, really? So once that got so far, I mean, the same goes for UNKLE as well. I didn't really ask to be in that band. I just got offered, and you look at the tour dates and the people that are working, like, yeah, I guess so, why not? But once the Nails thing kind of went awry, I had to assess what I was going to do next and look at what my dreams were. And that wasn't to just join bands and play other people's songs. That was to do my own thing. So that directly informed what I did next. It's like, now's the time. That's going to be the response.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about that is, again, you can't necessarily, and I shouldn't really, because I'm I know you. If I was just having a conversation in general, I'd be like, I wouldn't want to try and inform your thought process. But for me, looking back at those experiences, you can't necessarily beat yourself up too much and say, because did they treat you well? Were you treated well by those people? Because it's very different working with UNKLE and Nails as it is when you're building a band and creating with Bad for Lazarus or Matchbox. Were you treated well in those environments? You can't necessarily put it all down to yourself. Why those, did they look after you, for example?
Sure. Well, which band are you asking about, Nails?
I guess Nails would be the first one.
Yeah. Trent was very kind, man. Like, he really looked after me and took a really keen interest. And like you say, I don't really look at it as a disaster or a failure. The number of people they tell you that played in that band that you've never heard of. I was kind of surprised that things were announced when they were, and he was really pushing to announce that. So I think under normal circumstances, you just wouldn't have heard that I was out there.
So because I guess that's a lot of a thing that people, and again, I don't want to push you to talk about it if you don't want to talk about it, but I think people would be interested to know, did you get a visa? Were you able to move out there? Because again, this is like going about the success thing, because we'll go into more detail about where you are now, because I think that's most important. But again, were you given everything? Were you given the visa? Were you able to move out there? And what led to you not taking that? Because again, quite frankly, people would go, oh, if I was in that situation, I'd have sucked 50 dicks. I'd have bent over for Trent, you know. And I don't mean to belittle the situation, but
Not at all.
where were you at with that? You know, did they give you everything, and what led to you finishing up?
Yeah, I had a 10-year visa, and I definitely thought about staying when the whole thing kind of went topsy-turvy. I didn't give up at all. Like I got a phone call one day, and they said I can have you on I can have you on a plane flying you home tonight or tomorrow. Which do you prefer? But to be honest, my father had passed away like that. I forget whether it was even the same weekend because it became such a clusterfuck of impetus.
Mm.
And so really, when you ask me about that, that's most of what I think about.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I didn't go back for his funeral because I was doing that. And so at that point, I was just a bit of a space cadet, man. I wasn't really very present, so it's kind of hard for me to remember too many specific things, to be honest.
No, yeah. I mean, yeah. Obviously, that's a huge personal thing. To, you know, did that lead to you? Because again, you seem to have become more in touch with your emotions over the years. From what I'm gathering, did you kind of leave off the back of that to go and create your own stuff? You know, is that what led to you kind of just being like, I'm not going to stay here. I'm not going to follow this kind of cliche train of success. You know,
I wish I could say that, but definitely I wanted to stay on the cliche train of success at that point. I felt like I had a lot to prove.
Right. So again, what was it that made you make that decision to come back and do Lazarus and you know, and not stay in America and all that stuff? I'll explain why I'm pushing this in a minute.
Sure. I mean, I suppose more than anything, man, I needed musicians to play with. And, I mean, for fuck's sake, I couldn't drive, Dom. I was living in LA, like my apartment block went straight out onto a highway. Like I hadn't done much fucking networking, you know what I mean? It would have been quite a bold new life, which I was definitely kind of up for in a way. But I think more tangibly than anything, it was literally came down to that. If I was going to put together a couple of bands, at that point as well, I was starting Painted Smiles with Mikey from Sixth.
Nice.
So I was just trying to figure out everything.
Yeah.
And everyone I knew was in England, really.
Yeah. So I guess the crux of it is, did you feel uncomfortable? I guess, did you feel uncomfortable with that? You know, again, we talk about the kind of train of success and the, you know, the cliche. Did you feel uncomfortable? It sounds to me like you weren't happy with that. You were, you know, LA I do it all the time, like, because I lived in Boston, so I'm like, shit, I should be in LA right now. You know, I should have moved to LA. I should have stayed in Boston, right? And so was that what that was for you? You were like, I don't want to be here. I'm not happy here. You know, you said you were kicked out of Nails, but it sounds like you just had you just reached a mutual impasse. Am I right with that? Like,
no, it was more of a kicking out. I think it had happened a few days before. Now I look back on it, I remember turning up to a practice and looking at one of the members saying morning and not getting anything back. And I'm obviously a bit of a mumbler, so I was sort of like, morning? And I didn't get anything back. And I looked at my tech and he was like, oh. So now I look back on it, I think it was in the system for a few days.
Shit, so what was that, man? Like, what did you do?
I imagine what I think happened was...
You're such a lovely human being. That's sorry, man. Anyway.
I think what I thought a practice was at that point was being in your corner and fucking around.
Right.
Especially, I mean, the only band I'd ever really had creative practices with was 80s Matchbox, and those are some noisy practices, man. Some weird shit's happening.
Yeah.
So I think I thought, well, I'm here now. Let's have some fun, find our way around the songs, like find out the rich Fownes notes. Oh, I'm not going to do that again while they're going, what the fuck is he doing?
Right. So you didn't fit into the mold of what they wanted?
Oh, I think we were just there to play the songs. And no one really said, like, why are you fucking around with stuff?
So they, like, moved you out there, got you an apartment to rehearse everything, made you a member of the band, and then kicked you out because you were messing around and being playful with the tunes. Effectively.
Sure. I mean, maybe he didn't interpret it as playful, and that's only my interpretation of it anyway, Dom.
Yeah.
And even the way you say it is so emphatic. You know, I'm not angry about it like that at all. I think it was an absolutely balmy thing to have even done in the first place.
No, I mean, my last question on that, because I'm very keen to move on. The reason why I've asked is, again, perception. this perception of this perfect environment. That's the reason I pushed you on the NIN stuff and that, because I think, again, it's very good to know that you've been through these experiences, your experience of those experiences, that it's not all sunshine, roses, and, you know, even the fact, like you talking about not being able to drive in LA, that's a huge thing. I've been in it.
I mean, I was out there for a couple of months and it was lonely, man.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
You get taken home at the end of practice and you're like, well, I'm in my little apartment. I don't know anyone.
Yeah, that's why. So just in case you were wondering why I've kind of gone on that line, is because I think it's important for people to know that it's not, you know, that you've been able to make a career doing shit that you like, the way you enjoy it in a lot of cases, you know, and if that's not good enough for some people, then fair enough, I suppose. So did you leave it on, you know, we'll talk a little bit about UNKLE and then we'll go back into your current
Sure.
ideas to finish. Did you leave it on good terms? Did you kind of, because I guess the kicking out thing, you know, the importance of connections and all that stuff is perhaps overstated sometimes. Did you leave with good connections, or did you kind of, was that a chapter of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a fairly nice conversation with Trent on the phone and left it at that, really. Like, he has a lot of needy people around him, man, so he doesn't need to be throwing around explanations or, you know, made to feel weird about anything. He's got a lot of shit to take care of.
Yeah.
So I fully respect that, man.
No, that's fair enough, man. And thank you for opening up about that, because again, the reason why we're doing these chats is to try and get people to be as open and honest as they can about their success. Because again, that's the reason you're here. The reason you're here with me, and I greatly respect your time, is that, you know, people have an idea of what it's like to be you. People have an idea of what it's like to go and be on, you know, have the honor of being a touring member of NIN or UNKLE, and it's not as black and white as that. Do you know what I mean? Equally,
sure. On a good day it is.
Well, and it's the same with 80s Matchbox. You achieved an excellent amount of success, but it was chaos. You know, I mean, you know, I was able to meet that band a few times after your time, and it was chaos all the way through. Which is,
from what I hear, things ramped up a little towards the end.
Yeah, it was actually one of my. I reference it as one of my most challenging interviews to organise.
Who are you talking to?
When I was talking about 80s Matchbox, and I was talking to the 80s Matchbox incarnation where Dom was it, and that's how I met Dom and became
right.
But yeah, it was one of the most chaotic interviews to sort out at the time. Like I've obviously dealt with people of all levels and shapes and sizes, and that was definitely
got some weird shapes and some weird sizes.
Yeah, that was a talk. That was like a van outside of a venue in York. And everyone was not having a good day. So yeah, I always reference that as my most challenging kind of interview with one of my most favorite bands, because it was, you know, that was an incredible band.
Me too, though. Absolutely, that's one of the reasons I came to Brighton. It's sort of ridiculous that I ended up in it. Really, like I just wanted to be in a city that bred that kind of music. I never meant to play in them. Yeah,
absolutely, man, absolutely. And I mean, like to be able to sort of summarize in terms of your, and I know success, again, you know, it is a bit of a general term, but in terms of how you look at your career now, you know, this new phase of your career might be the most successful, you know, and I certainly get the vibe you're excited.
I'm the most excited for the music I've ever been, for sure, yeah.
Which is awesome, but what memories, you know, talk about Brixton and stuff like that, you know, what will you look back on when you reach your death? Which sounds
probably mostly wrapped up in those early Matchbox days. I mean, our first tour was with System of a Down, or the first tour that I joined there with was for System of a Down across Europe for a month. Like, that's a pretty big way to begin. And then before that, I was just a music student in college. My first gig was within that year, and we've been playing a System of a Down cover. And so by the end of the year, I was sitting at a table with them talking about songwriting. You know, that would be a success. When we toured with Queens of the Stone Age, that was amazing.
Yeah.
And just, there's a whole lot, man. Now I look back on it, it was like you say, it was fucking mad. I mean, I think being a little bit of a little brother to them and a sort of slight outsider, I kind of managed to stay out of a lot of the really volcanic disputes, and kind of, it looked quite funny to me. I've always been quite good at getting on with people, like I was saying. So I would just sort of stand back in a sort of, kind of academic amusement.
Yeah.
I think other people, like I know Dom had a really hard time with it, maybe took it a bit more to heart.
Yeah.
And for them, of course, it was their whole world and all their babies wrapped up in one. So I think it was inherently a lot more emotional for them.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
was mad, and it
Well,
was fun.
yeah, well, that's it. That's it. It's fun. I mean, it's interesting because I've kind of encountered, different members of the band over the years. I actually got to play with Sim in piano wire in my first ever band. We played with them in York,
Oh,
and
great.
it was surreal to see Sim again in that context. When obviously, and I booked Dom in London, a few years ago with his one of his more recent bands. I know he's like super creative. I've got so much time for Dom.
I think he's
But
got a
like,
band for each song.
yeah, he's great. It's great. But yeah, like I guess sort of winding up because I could talk your ear off for hours about this stuff. But like,
I've
you
got
know,
nowhere to be.
in terms of your future and stuff, what do you want to achieve? Like, what's left for you to do? It feels like the self-reflection, and you've got yourself to a point, and a roller coaster. We'll come back to that. The roller coaster metaphor. You're on the roller coaster. You're on the journey now to kind of self-actualization, self-realization. So
But it's
what?
annoying because a lot of the answers to those questions are wrapped up in specific answers that I kind of can't give away too much right yet.
Right.
And I think the way that I'm going to be performing, the way that I'm going to be feeling, and what I want to show people is such a result of that kind of honesty. And it's a strange kind of dichotomy because in a way that's going to be the biggest pose I've done yet.
Right.
It's going to be very characterful, and I don't mean that in any kind of silly way. Like, it will be a character almost.
Right.
So, but that character is me in its sort of most primordial, raw form.
Right. I was going to say, because we talked about image earlier. So the character, obviously, I'm not going to ask you to go into, but that to me would be like, oh, you kind of sort of hiding yourself and your real self behind this character again or whatever. But in fact, you're saying to me that this is going to be the most true version of Rich Fownes that's ever been.
Sure, it's the raw one. It's not the one that I wanted people to see before when I've been performing. It's almost the one that I haven't wanted people to see.
Right. So the most.
So I think that's the most important thing to show now.
Yeah, absolutely, and I guess from a kind of all-rounding standpoint, what have you realized about yourself? Like, obviously, again, we've talked about we have talked a little bit about your background, some of the issues you went through, but again, like, what, I guess, key things have you learned about yourself through this journey? Like, to get yourself to where you want to be, going through all these experiences, what are the core things that you are going to take forward that you've learned into this new journey, into this new musical creation, your personal life?
You mean psychologically?
Yeah.
I think knowing your limitations and knowing, conversely, what other people can bring to your personality is a huge part of you being able to make your best work. So before, I've always been very protective, especially like I was saying in Lazarus, I'd have a lot of ego riding on it. So maybe I would be overprotective of certain things because I felt like they had to deliver something very specific. But over the years, the most kind of spontaneous and easy to listen to and fun music I've made has been when I've let my guard down.
Yeah.
And that's, like I'm saying, with the raw honesty of the performance, so is the raw honesty of the writing. And that's really good to do with people. So in future, I really plan to work with smart, talented people that understand the mania that I'm trying to portray.
That's cool.
And rather than trying to rely on myself for everything, like, have fun working with people and not be such a... I think there's a lot of pressure, especially with the social media thing, for everyone to be a master of everything.
Yeah.
And I think you get the best results when you have fun with everything, which may be a little more than you in the corner of a room on your phone.
Yeah.
So I want to get some of that kind of chaotic sparkle between human beings going on.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do.
That sounds good, man. Well, I hope we can have a kind of a more Yeah, well, we'll do. I'm sure we'll do a more musical themed interview at some point about that new project when it comes out. I'm excited to hear it, dude. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. Because I mean, obviously, like it's been part of catch up for me, and also
Yeah, it's been lovely to see you, Dom. Thank you for
yeah,
having me, man.
it's mostly a good catch up. You know, it's an excuse to catch up with a friend. You know, I have a lot of respect for your situation and where you've come from, and thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself with me as well. Because I
And
mean,
yourself, man, you're a very inspiring young man.
man, well, it's, you know, inspiration is an odd one, isn't it? I'm just, you know, like I say, I'm just a dude who I wanted to do something like with Soundsphere and all this shit, man. It's all about just being creative and doing stuff that makes me happy. And to be honest, you know, going back to what you were saying before, I'm trying to surround myself with motivational people that I admire, respect, and can gain stuff from. So sitting with you has already improved my day. Like sitting with
Oh,
you has
that's very
already,
kind.
and I'll tell you why. I'm not just bullshitting you. It's like when you listen to somebody else who struggled in the same way, in some of the same ways that I have. It's amazing to kind of you draw from that. Like I draw inspiration from that, man. Do you know what I mean? Like you've been through a lot of shit. You've created a lot of shit. You've succeeded in a lot of ways. But perception is such a key part of that. So
Oh, glad to be of service, man. It's been really lovely to talk to you as well.
yeah, absolutely. And let's catch up soon, man. Like let's catch up in the next few weeks or months or whatever. Let's not leave it 2 years this time.
Please.
And just before we finish, have you got anything that you want to add? Obviously, people that have supported you, you know, people that have supported you through your musical things. You can't release any stuff about your musical project, and I completely understand that. But anything you'd like to say to people that have supported you over the years through creative endeavors, or anything you want to promote or share with our audience?
Honestly, I think the only person I can thank at the moment is my partner, Molly, who's been in the room with me through every piece of mania I've gone through this existential, introverted quarantine. So that's been an amazing person to have around.
That's cool, man. Well, shout out to Molly, and I'm really happy for you, dude. And yeah, all right, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. And
Peace out, Holmes.
I'll catch you down the road.
Nice one. Lots of love, Dom.
Take it easy, man. Lots of love.
See you
Bye.
soon. Bye-bye.